Welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Shaista and I'll be your host for today's webinar. So every time we bring new topics, new speakers and cater to different industry verticals. Today we have our speaker from financial industry and we would be talking about how digital transformation in contact centers is driving customer experience for financial services. To take us through this webinar, I have two speakers with me. Both are very experienced. So I have Dheeraj Mohan from Equitas Small Finance Bank and Sachin Bhatia from Ameyo. Dheeraj heads strategy, investor relations, analytics, and customer experience for Equitas Small Finance Bank and is part of the bank's management team. He has been with the bank for over 5.5 years and has seen Equitas transform from an NBFC to a small finance bank. He has close to 20 years of experience spanning across investment advisory, product management, strategy, and new initiative. Prior to joining Equitas, he has worked at some of India's leading NBFCs like Cholamandalam, Edelweiss, and Anand Rathi Financial Services. Educated in Kerala and alumnus of Kirloskar Institute of Advanced Management Study, he currently lives in Chennai. Welcome, Dheeraj. Uh, Before introducing our second speaker, just a few instructions for all the attendees. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into your question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end of the webinar as well. Now, moving to our second speaker of the day, Sachin is co-founder and marketing head at Ameyo. A computer scientist by education and a product person at heart, Sachin has been involved in understanding needs and delivering customer engagement solution to consumer-facing companies in 60 plus country. He believes emerging markets have unique needs and need differentiated solutions. Welcome, Sachin, and over to you.
Thank you, Shaista, and a very warm welcome to Dheeraj and everyone who has joined us this afternoon. Uh, it is seldom that you get to talk to someone who has a bird's eye view of whole of operations and its impact, and not just operations. So, my previous discussion with Dheeraj was very, very enriching, and I will try and bring some of it to our audience today. Uh, let me initiate by putting some agenda to the discussion today. There have been two recent changes uh, from the regulator and the government side on how contact centers operate and how help desk would operate in future in financial services. Uh, we're gonna then touch a little bit upon how Dheeraj looks at Equitas's customers and their needs and what is changing on that side. And finally, a few thoughts on how do we stitch it all together. There's this basic layer of infrastructure. There is now a layer of analytics and data that is getting built up, and then automation and bots, and whether it's relevant or is it happening because people have fear of missing out? Is there real value around some of those initiatives? That would be our last topic. We'll also share a little bit about what we do with Equitas, but that's towards the end. And please, if there are any questions that come up, do put them, and Chaista will take up during the Q&A or even during the slides if it's relevant. So without further ado, there was this very, very large development that happened late last year. And I think government has shown some tremendous intent on making remote working available for long term. And it initiated because of pandemic. All of us have seen the situation, but it seems that the government took a very, very intentful stand that this is going to stay, and if required, businesses can actually plan strategically rather than doing a knee-jerk reaction to how a remote would work. On that, let me bring in Dheeraj. Dheeraj, first of all, and I know it seems like eons ago now, but when pandemic came in, how did you guys manage? Did you go remote? And what are your thoughts long term? And does this regulation change anything for you?
Yeah, good afternoon, Sachin, and lovely to connect with you again. And I'm happy to know that things like this happen. Knowledge sharing is something which I look forward to, because end of the day I gain the most, and that self intention drives me to this. And so again, once again, thank you, Sachin. I think you guys are doing a good job on this. Yeah, pandemic hit like any black swan event. You wake up one day and things are not normal. It's not that you don't hear about it, and it's not that you don't discuss about it in boardrooms and meetings, but you just never are ready for it. And I think that's what happened. The pandemic, exactly the same. And it's happened time and again whenever we've had national level crisis. It's not that we've never thought of the situation before, but we have not thought of the scale of the situation, or it will happen to us. But pandemic did. Luckily, I think on the technology side, we are a new bank, so certain things were in place. So we turned remote or work from home almost instantly. Most of our employees had VPN connectivities, and thankfully, have desktops or laptops or even phones, which could allow them to continue doing work, office work. And so we moved in, I think, very seamlessly. There were certain level of connectivity issues because we are there in about 800 branches. We are in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 of India, and some of them, some of those places may not have the connectivity with you and I enjoy in metros. So but they still have connectivity, which was not the case many years back. So we moved in seamlessly. I don't think our operations suffered. We never had to shut our branch because we didn't have the required infrastructure to operate. I think yes, we've all gone through very, I think, common phases that we are all working from home. Connectivity will be slow, but we will still get back to you. Please, take this into cognizance. I think any of us called a toll free, heard that. And I don't think any of us got irritated hearing it. We understood. And I think at some level, empathy helped us. But I think we were still able to pick every single call and speak to every single customer, I believe with a bit of a delay, but we did. And that's just on the customer contactability. But end of the day, you're running a bank, and thankfully, it's no longer bookkeeping with ledgers, so we could operate fairly well. And lastly, before I close my views on this, the good thing, I think the only positive thing the pandemic has done, one, it's tested our IT infrastructure. Second, it's given people like me a glimpse of what work from home is. So now I know what it is. I no longer will say, oh my God, if I wish I could work from home. I have experienced it a little more than what I require, but we went through 8 months of work from home.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think my family also now knows, what level of a pain it can be if you have somebody working from home, and also, family studying at home. So we've
Sure.
gone through that learning, and I think we've come back a little more wiser.
So Dheeraj, when the pandemic hit, I think customers across for us, I remember in about initial 2 to 3 weeks, we moved about 60,000 agents at customer locations to remote, and most of them didn't even have desktop. So we actually launched a mobile app to manage the contact center on mobile. But all this was being thought of as temporary. But I think mid-September, October, we went back to our customers and said, do you think you're going to come back? Because people had tasted what I would call success, and there were significant infrastructure savings. There were other reasons, employability, and everybody felt that, this euphoria of, oh, we could completely go remote came in. How does Equitas look at this? I know that you guys are serving a very wide variety, and what I term as the Bharat of India, right? So are you thinking remote or hybrid long term, or things are going to be back to normal, or things are already back to normal? How are you guys thinking about it long term?
So I think from a long-term perspective, things have given us a lot of clarity. So one is quite clear: we will not be remote as the only option. That's very clear. We realize remote has its benefits, but also has its difficulties. We will not be central. That's also no longer the default option. And like you said, it's a hybrid. And from our perspective, And I'm sure, contact centers have already been in multi-location. That's not new in the country. But now we're going to stretch that boundary. Why should my contact center be in Bombay or in Pune or in Delhi or in Chennai or in Hyderabad? Why can't it be in tier two cities?
Hmm.
And I think that's something we've all been able to visualize. But why tier two? So when what we are discussing right now, and at least internally, so we've already said that regional call centers or contact centers need to be in tier two, tier three cities. They need not be large, floor plans. They can be much smaller. And it gives us, I think, also the comfort that at a switch of a button, we can be completely decentral in 800 locations. It's
Sure.
almost like cloud. What's happening? You're talking about cloud because you've got that ability to scale up in a blink of an eye. So for us, even that resource augmentation, resource infrastructure, people, and all of that. So it's hybrid with an ability to be elastic and go completely, hyper local. Gives us a lot of comfort to launch things faster. So that's how we're thinking right now.
I think elastic is the word there, and uh, for the audience who's not aware, the OSP guidelines are basically a regulator's view of how a contact center can operate and where you could connect and interconnect and so on and so forth. And long story short, I think the government has allowed whatever Dheeraj is now saying. It's very, very seamless. You could have contact centers completely decentralized. You could have a cloud infrastructure serving it. You might not even require VPNs to run it. So, which was a very, very big problem earlier, that there used to be these physical telephony lines. They needed to be in your name, and then you needed infrastructure locally. You could not interconnect to other people. Let's say you wanted to outsource a part to a BPO. Those things were not possible earlier. But with this regulation change, and I'm sure your compliance teams are already looking at it, this has become really, really easy. So we wanted to bring Dheeraj's perspective on this. The second change, which has happened very recently, is the ODR system for digital payments. The regulator says basically that there has to be a central dispute resolution record, and the customer should be able to raise it, and the regulator has then access to it. And I'm sure everybody had some sort of a complaint management or a resolution management system in place, but with the regulator coming in, this has become more of a it's a necessity, if things have not been set up well. But let me bring in Dheeraj. Dheeraj, how did you guys view this? And I know it's a very, very complicated and sensitive issue on what do you call a complaint, what do you call a grievance. You and I had a chat about it, but throw some light on, does this change anything in the bank? How are you guys looking at it?
Materially, no, because disputes and complaints are taken very seriously, including now how banks have to report it in the annual report. They've gone and strengthened, RBI has strengthened the disclosures. So I don't think materially there has been too much of change. But like I keep telling you, the complexity is very different from organizations like us, where the end customer, so if it is people like you and me, we are very clear. We know it's a dispute. We know it's a grievance. We know it's an inquiry. We know it's a clarification, and we can articulate it quite well. But the segments we operate, it's not even gray. Yeah, yeah, it's just a dark spot where we find it difficult to how do we classify it and try to remove subjectivity from this entire thing. And I think it's at that level, is where humans finally have to look at AI and see is that an area we should look at to remove human subjectivity, so that it stands the test of time, stands the regulators, stands classifications. But yeah, so we all have robust systems for this, but it's how it adapts to the customer, which is where we're all putting our heads on.
Yeah, I remember, let's say there's an example that the transaction has not gone through, uh, is what customer reports. But he has actually not even initiated a transaction. He's not able to do a transaction. He doesn't know how to do a transaction, or all is saying, my transaction is not going through. And, the simple language or a linguist would say transaction not going through is a complaint. whereas how do I do my transaction is an inquiry, right? So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think
Sachin,
especially for the yeah.
actually, I just want to bring one perspective. Um, so, as you know, banking is being pushed to becoming a commodity or a back end or the one who manufactures steel for a Jaguar in the front end. And you know the fintech space. So, you know, they are, in my view, they are like financial piranhas who are eating up the entire value chain. And wherever they see value, they eat it. Wherever they can see the potential to create value, they create it, and again, they don't share it. So that's the way we operate. So this is one very interesting area. Today, you want to make a WhatsApp payment or a Google payment, let's say to me, and let's say it gets debited to you and it doesn't get credited to me. Do you call WhatsApp? Do
Yeah.
you call Google? Who do you call? You call the bank, and he is at the back end. He doesn't even know what phone you're using to do all of this. It may be an Android 11 issue, who knows? But the customer then knows how to switch, and he never calls up WhatsApp. I don't know if WhatsApp even has a toll free, but they'll call up the bank. And imagine how blind the bank is to any of this.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'll just call that out
That's a
and share some
that's
of
a
our grievances.
very yeah that's a very good point that these front ends or the interfaces coming in, unless the system stabilizes and there are good accountabilities set. I know between interbank, 10 years back, interbank, it used to be if you had to trace that where is it, you had to go to your branch, the branch will say it's in clearing. I remember those days. And now everything is so real time, and you gave a very good example that somebody initiated a transaction, the actual amount got, there used to be even more complexity with wallets, but let's say with accounts it's straight going to the, taking from the bank and giving to the bank. If the transaction is not going through, the customer will always call the bank. You're absolutely right. So all the costs are with the bank, but all the data is residing with the front end provider, who then monetizes data. Very, very interesting perspective. And I think that is why the government also wanted, I think this regulation is more for the guys who are just trying to be front end, rather than, because banks always had these things. You could always walk into a branch and lodge a complaint. There was actually physical presence of touch and feel that existed. Very interesting point. Let me bring everyone on what Equitas actually does and what I understand. And I coined this term, or borrowed this term, called Equitas does banking for the Bharat user. Uh, uh, Dheeraj, tell me a little bit about the profile of your customers. How do you look at the persona? What sort of challenges? And when they think, or you think, customer experience for them, what is really important for them?
Yeah. So I hope some of we are a small finance bank, which by default means we give small finance, which is the financial inclusion space. And there are a bunch of us which have got created over the last 5 years. This is despite having nationalized banks in the country for 70 years. They still had to have a differentiated bank to drive financial inclusion. And all this is just to backdrop to tell you who we are really reaching out to. So out of our 3 million customers, I think about 2.9 million of them, we may be the first formal financial institution giving them a loan. And from that perspective, they're really, for a lack of better word, let's say bottom of the pyramid, but I like Bharat better. That's the segment. And that's the segment we operate. We, at the same time, have a huge challenge that as a bank, if you really need to grow, you need deposits. That means you need to by default go and attract the people who have money.
Yeah.
So you need the savers and you have the net creditors, and let's call Bharat as mostly the net creditors. And so we need to go after savers. Savers are people who already park their money in banks, not the investors who put it in slightly more exotic products.
Yeah.
So the savers are okay because they're used to banking, but the net creditors or the Bharat, they're not. And so that's the segment. They are, if you drive on any Indian road, and if you don't see our customer, take the next turning you see, which is a 30 feet wide road, and you will see all our customers. This is irrespective of it being rural or metro. So that's the segment we really operate. We call them domestic help, we call them two-wheeler mechanic, we call them a haircutting salon. There are many names, but I think at the core of it, they're all really entrepreneurs of India, who are transforming, if I can put it. Because on the same slide, I'm seeing online payment, UPI apps, e-commerce, and that's something which we've really seen happen during this. So unlike demonetization, where I think people like you and me became digital, if we weren't. But during the pandemic, we saw these customers adopting digital, and no, and this is not anecdotal anymore. The person who washes my car, I give him a WhatsApp payment. The lady who comes and irons my clothes, I don't give her cash anymore. It's all transaction. We are seeing the same thing in our community who we lend to. We have the stray Twitter messages, we have the stray customers asking us, trying to access their mobile banking with smartphones. And I was reading somewhere in India about 600 million smartphone users are there, which means some of our customers are also getting converted. So while they are Bharat, I think they are the Gen Next Bharat or Gen Z Bharat, or
I
the
think
new.
there's gonna be a jump thanks to what I call the geo revolution, that everybody, data is almost democratized. Uh, and when you were talking about the lockdown, I realized I've not visited an ATM for the last 1 year. So every payment that I've done has been completely online, right? Uh, but let's talk a little bit about these user profiles. Are they coming into the branches? They prefer to call. Do you see them doing WhatsApp? What's changing on their side? What's if I am building a service for the Bharat user today? Can you tell me that how do I serve them? Is it a contact center? Are they high touch, low touch? What would be some of the traits?
So they are very high touch. They will walk into the branch, and that's been their historic behavior. But what we've really seen in the last 12 months is they're also aspirational. Let's not forget that they're extremely aspirational. And they've started to buy better phones. Like you said, the geo effect. So the YouTubes and the TikToks of the world, the TVs become, and is this critical entertainment for them. And I think, and that's what we are starting to see, they've slowly now moved, not just having the smartphone as a source of entertainment, but they're also starting to be empowered or feeling empowered. We've started to see those signs, and like from do it yourself to do it digitally. That's the, and I think that leap, what you see in China and other countries, I think it's slowly coming into India. So while yes, they prefer the branch, but they have started to creep into social media to reach us out. They've started to call the call center, the toll free. We've started to see that, and we've seen, and this is where we've been caught, a little behind. That we've suddenly realized that we're not equipped to deal with them, because it's not the traditional way. It's not English. And it's not even English. It's a lot more than that which
Yeah.
is happening. So yeah, we're seeing that trend change, and across profiles, like I said, across profiles.
I remember you mentioned that walk-ins versus number of calls versus other channels. Would you be okay sharing what sort of ratios? Because they were starkly in favor of walk-ins into the branch, I remember.
Yeah. So these set of Bharat customers, in at least in our view, almost I think 99% happens at the branch. That's their first port. So that's what they do. The 1% is what reaches out through a toll free, or sends us a Twitter in a language we may not be able to comprehend, or somehow figure out an email ID and then put it. But I think this 1% is rapidly going to grow,
Yeah.
because even the branches understand that it's an expensive proposition for us. Nobody wants crowded branches. That means higher real estate. That means eventually you're not going to give good service. You walk into any bank branch, if there are more than 10 customers, by default you're giving bad service to 5 of them. So that's the challenge we have. But today the statistics is in favor of high touch branch.
And I've spoken to a lot of experts around this, and people used to say, Bharat would stay on voice. But let me tell you that I think the the adoption of WhatsApp is just, and we are also WhatsApp partners. It's just mind-boggling in India, and I think they're doing payments, and then because it's also a social messaging and a social network thing, the proliferation is really fast now. uh, a bank or a business has to sit up and listen to this, because as Dheeraj was saying, let's say if you're handling a transaction at branch, it's going to cost you X rupees. If you handle a call, maybe it's going to cost you 0.1 X rupees. But if you go to a messaging medium, this will go one tenth further, and you can have one agent handle multiple chats at the same time. So as if your user is ready and you are not moving, then you are basically leaving money on the table or giving your competition that advantage of better experience and better margins at the same time. So you can't wait for a threshold volume to come up. I think the message here is that if you're observing that your users are going on the digital side, maybe you should encourage them rather than wait for a critical mass to come in, because it's going to save a lot of cost and your experience and learning is going to be better than the other guys. With that, let me come to uh, some of the things that Dheeraj has top of the mind. Dheeraj, we all know that, and I'm from the contact center tech space. There are these basic infrastructural things of routing calls and routing messages, and recently people have started layering them with analytics across systems and analyzing, why churn is happening, or who should I give a rebate right now. Does this customer qualify for a rebate or not? And then, once you have that layer, allowing bots to handle some of these things. These are the fairy tale methods people are evangelizing, that this is how it's going to happen. But a lot of it, I think, is the devil is in the detail, that how exactly are you collecting data, how exactly are you, which part of the interaction are you automating, is it actually a good experience or not a good experience. So I know that you have a lot on your mind when it comes to data, but can you tell us top 2 3 things that you have on your agenda for the next coming quarters, specifically from a customer experience standpoint?
Yeah, so I think the first thing we're trying to do is to get a data lake in place so that you have all the data. Today we have, but if you ask me, do we have all the data from a experiential point? The answer is no, and that's the first thing we're trying to put in. Hopefully, that will then start driving what we call hyper personalization remotely, and that's where you can empower the agent to take decisions. So you see customer profitability, and if a customer complains or has a grievance, can you resolve it instantly, and that too backed with data. So you're not again taking a subjective call, but you're taking an empowered call backed with enough of data. And all of that needs that layer of data which comes in, and multiple systems feeding into it. And with the latest on APIs, I think all that becomes fairly seamless. It becomes near real time. And bots are another thing which we've also started to explore. We have about 100 and odd bots now. Those bots are, let me be honest with you, are mostly internal facing, because they're still in their adolescence. I think it'll take some time before we leave it out to a customer. But what we've seen is customers are also progressing, so they're willing to talk to a bot. Before they used to get irritated. I remember, like, I'm talking to a machine. Why are you putting a machine in front of me? Now they're okay with it because the machine's not doing too bad a work. So if you look at the call center, we have about 10% of our calls on the toll free are for things like checkbook requests, what's my balance, very mundane things which they can do it on the phone, uh, either through the app, or they want to still call somebody and do it. And bots are brilliant at this. They can just pick it up fast and do a lot of real time straight through. I don't have to go through a quality check for any of those. So I think this space is, there's a lot of players. The good thing is the ecosystem is developing. There are a lot of fintechs and a lot of technology players now building around this. We, at least in our view, don't think we have to do everything in house. We don't need to hire the experts and then try to keep them engaged. I think the entire collaboration and partnership is working wonderful over here, where clear value adds are there, and there are specialized firms who just really good at this, and that's all they do, day in and day out. So this is, I think, the big ones. Like I just to sum up, is the entire data lake, the entire empowerment of the agent through data. The last one is getting more bots to service customers and handle a lot of straight through volumes. And all of this with the overarching theme of hyper personalization, and which is traditionally done by giving you a relationship manager, but now can we give you not just a virtual relationship manager, almost like a cyborg, if I would call it. Nobody takes offense. That's the
It is it is such a mind-boggling trend that we have seen in banking, that the high net worth individual who was being served through a field relationship manager, um, how much of that has moved in very large banks in India to a completely centralized, well managed, well measured, disciplined process of relationship management with a lot of backing of data. So when somebody was in the field and doing a conversation, you don't know what is being talked about, right? But with this being driven from a centralized place, I would rather not use the word contact center, because the profile is very different, right? It's just remote contact that you're doing, but it saves ton of money. It gives you tons of insights, and you can get better with it, right? You're no longer dependent on the quality of it's not a sales job anymore. And I think that's a huge trend that we have observed. On the bots, there are two clear things where we saw real actionable. One was, uh, SMS is becoming more or less obsolete. Who reads SMS right now, apart from OTP, which also apps are now taking up automatically, right? So you actually, if you remember 2 years back, how many times you opened SMS, and now how many times you opened SMS, maybe I will call you back. That's the only time I actually check that has anything else been added. So the notifications have moved to WhatsApp. So let's say if you want to remind people of a payment that they have to make, and they are not on credit, I'm assuming. So you send a notification on WhatsApp, and then on that notification itself, somebody can reply and start a conversation, right? So see, the opportunity of this going into the contact center is almost negligible, right? So let's say if it's a promise to pay that you were seeking, from within the message, you could say, would you be able to pay by X date? If you ask a question, people tend to answer. So they no, yes, right? And then a simple bot can say, let me bring somebody in if there's a requirement, or he or she can just record the date that the customer has mentioned. That's one use case which is very powerful, and especially with the lending side right now pressurized, I think that would be one area where we'll see some progress. The second is the sheer amount of volume because of moratorium. I think we discussed that. And now the collections that will come thereafter, I think the volumes are just overwhelming, at least in some of the asset classes. So if you have to reach out to 1 million users and collect your debt, and that's not your normal monthly trend that you have done, how do you manage it? So we've experimented with a very simple voice bot, which could initiate a conversation, which could give you comfort in an empathetic voice. Here is, would you be able to pay? And by when time, what would be the medium of payment, right? The simple questions that the agent is asking usually at level 1. And we've even had conversations where the other side did not realize that this was a bot, because if the flow is super managed, as soon as the flow breaks, we say, hold on, let me bring in my colleague, and an agent comes in, right? So if you can seamlessly transfer, then also it works. These are two flows that we have seen with the bot side, which are getting traction. On insights and analytics, I think it's still early days from an experience data. It has been happening in the marketing automation space in B2B. There's somebody like a Segment doing it. But on the consumer side, to bring in a CDP which has all the events, all the profile data, all the engagement data, and not just data, the knowledge out of it. This was an irate call. This was a high emotion call, right? If you can have that metadata into a data lake, then there is a lot that you can do. And I think finally, Dheeraj mentioned about actionables. Can you enable the agent to take an action, not just view data, but can he initiate actions? Let's say initiate refund, and all this determined by an algorithm that whether the person qualifies or not qualifies, right? So a button is there, initiate refund, and that's it. Job done. It doesn't need to go to back office and so on and so forth. Um, Dheeraj, any part of the transaction today your agent is able to handle anything on the data side that you've seen, any movement, or is it still early days? Any results that you can talk about because we were able to do this, we achieved this, any case study there for you?
Yes, so it's early days for us. Like I said, most of our customers don't leave a digital footprint. So, we need to look at their behavior with us and solely with us before we take. Still early days, but yeah, I'll give you one classic example.
Yeah.
So again, since we're in the midst of a pandemic, I won't say it's over. Emergency loans are very, very critical in our business, because it shows that we care. It shows that we are not going to run away, and that level of trust for the Bharat users, it comes back, in loyalty and in their repayment behavior. But giving an emergency loan, 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, is being given by a front end staff, who's not a credit officer, who's not a chartered accountant, who's none of that, who can profile the customer to some extent, but he's empowered to give 5,000, 10,000 rupee loans in what we may term as an emergency. Today, this whole decision is taken through a bot which understands the customer's repayment track record, understands the customer's contactability with us. It's important when I say contactability, it is very, very critical. It determines the contactability of these customers. It runs some propensity model in looking at how profitable this customer is, and a few others, and it helps the frontline staff take that decision. And here, let me reiterate, the frontline staff is what we call a customer service officer, not a sales officer, it's a customer service officer, because that's who we are giving this empowerment to. And that whole thing today, happens just because of data.
Wow. That's a great example of a specific workflow being addressed by power of data. You have to make that decision in like a split second, that whether the agent or whether the officer can actually initiate that transaction or initiate that loan or not, and everything is coming algorithmically from the background. The empathy is of the human being and the intelligence is of the bot, which I think is the best. The bots, the only thing which is lacking is empathy, right? The day they are able to address emotion, I think we all should be very, very scared.
But they're there. So like you mentioned, understanding tonality,
yeah,
and trying to classify easy and irate customer. I think it's there. It's
a couple of years away, but I have no doubt, Dheeraj, that it'll become extremely difficult, especially let's say in a medium like text, that are you talking to a human being or a bot? It's going to be very, very difficult. And that is why you have these personas coming in. They're trying to humanize those bots. They will actually become more and more human, but will only fail at pure intelligence, or pure what you call as intuition, which I think is the last standing ground. Hey, but thanks for sharing this, Dheeraj. I think for our audience to understand that what and how you could take up a data project and actually execute it into an actionable on the contact center is pretty fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. Guys, I briefly want to touch that, Equitas has been with Ameyo for quite some time. Dheeraj, where all do you use us? Do you know which operations, which functions are you using us today? What all are you using Ameyo for today?
Yeah, today I think we extensively use Ameyo from the contact center. And today we call it the contact center, but the idea is to call it, an experiential center. And so all our agents, are completely empowered because of what your solution is. And let me also, really, really thank you that during the pandemic, I think they did it on the phone. And, that we are a bank, so numbers need to be masked. There are data privacy issues and the whole thing. I think we seamlessly did it. And somewhere it goes back to say that, you choose your partners wisely, carefully, and then just don't let them go. Even if they want to go, don't let them go. So yeah, so we today our entire contact center, which is hopefully tomorrow's experiential center, we'll continue to have you guys
Thanks.
because you
Thanks
guys
for
are
your
there.
trust. Yeah. Thanks for your trust. I think with remote, Equitas was also one of the early ones who came to us and said that, how do we do this remote completely, and the product has responded really well. In the meantime, Shaista, if there are any questions, we can start taking them now. I don't want to spend too much time on the Ameyo side, but if there are any questions, we've been doing work in banking for quite some time with HDFC. We have done stuff around collections, Standard Chartered customer service side. So if anybody wants to know about Ameyo, our website is ameyo.com. Uh, we serve both modern consumer tech companies like Zomato, Swiggy, Urban Clap, and then the heavyweights like Equitas, HDFC banks, and Chartered. Right? So we've worked with both traditional enterprises as well as the modern consumer tech companies, and a fairly large base around use cases are served on Ameyo today. Any questions that have come in, Shaista? We can take them now.
Yeah, so there's a question from Saurav. He says, working remote, how does CTI work with any CRM while on mobile?
Yeah, so I think it's a product related question, but our mobile app has what we call as a. Have you guys used Google Maps? So when you move to another window, there is this floating widget that comes off the Google Map, right? Let's say you are on a call and the Google Map is a floating widget. Similarly, Ameyo's mobile app goes into that widget. You have the telephony control. You could have the backend as your CRM app, if I may call it. And then there are some pre-built integrations with players like Salesforce, Lead Squared that exist. And we also have then a custom CTI wherein we can show a portion of the CRM data within the Ameyo app. So it's a full-fledged contact center application, buddy. Your agents will have exactly the same functionality and view that they have on the desktop browser today. So it was a very product-specific question, but if there's any other question, we can take them now.
Yeah, so there's a question from Atul, but he's saying have a use case on collection. Okay, would like someone from your team to. Surely we'll get in touch with you, Atul. But if in case you still have some queries, you can ask over here as we have expert from Ameyo and from the financial industry as well.
Yes, Sachin, just on collections, I thought since there's a wider audience, some of the areas where we've seen a lot of help
Sure.
with these kind of technologies is, and given that our customers, like I will reiterate, are not having the best banking habits. So we run always a high check bounce. We have stated it publicly. Our check bounds are, in the ratio of 30% to close to 40-45% of the check or bank mandates get bounced. That means they don't keep money in the account, but they have money in hand. So we use bots heavily, voice bots, and not just blasting, a boring message, but also trying to get a date and time of when the payment will come. Should we send someone to pick it up? And we do those across multiple languages, and it's just made us so much more productive, so much more productive. And it's something I urge everyone to really, really look at.
Yeah.
And it's not intrusive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree that your simple task of confirmation of payments or confirmation of timelines, when can the payment be made, all those are today done by human beings, and it's really expensive and that doesn't add a lot of value because it's almost a scripted question. So you could have a bot collect that information both on chat and preferably on voice, because the Bharat users doesn't like the chat experience, and at least as of now. So if you're reaching outbound, let them feel that the bank has tried to reach them. There is a voice on the other end and they would respond. Let them respond in voice. They will be even happier. Don't ask them to press 1 2 and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So there's another question from Shobit, and he's asking, are there any limit on the number of conversations a bot can handle at a time?
Practically no. It's completely dependent on the amount of compute infrastructure you have. Today bots are infinitely scalable, so uh, there is no limit on uh, number of transactions or conversations you can have at one point of time. There could be commercial limits that somebody might say that you can have simultaneously these many conversations, but being an engineer, I can tell you that technically you could almost have limitless conversations. Everybody in the universe could be talking to one bot at the same time if required.
Uh, well, another question. This is from Atul, how can AI help in automating routine agent tasks?
Dheeraj, you want to take that? Anything that you have been able to do which automates what agent is doing today? Anything on that side, like robotic process automation or
Yeah,
filling of a
so
form? Yeah,
So today a lot actually. If you look at a traditional flow, you have an application form and you have supportings for an application form. You have a filled in application form and you have documents supporting it. You traditionally will have someone who eyeballs to check if there is data accuracy. And if there is not only data accuracy, if there is image accuracy, the picture on the application form, is it the same picture in the PAN card? Is a PAN card, if the PAN card mentioned, is it valid? You've got, you can go to government websites and get those things validated. All of that was done by humans before. Then I think it got digital or digitized. Paper became an HTML, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the intelligent work after that.
sure.
Today, and the entire, what we call D1, D2, the accuracy checking, the checking if the signature is accurate. All of that, what humans used to eyeball and then put in, now you run AIs on it, and that's, I think that's the easiest. That's, and what I'm telling you is not even new technology. I think it's there for about 4 or 5 years. This is the easiest way where it hits your bottom line because you can just process a lot more. So this is one I thought most
Yeah,
easiest.
there's one I can talk about. All of us have done some KYC process right now. If you have seen a very recent, again, a government regulation last year, February, I think video was allowed as a KYC channel. So you could actually have a video conversation. They mandated that a human being does the video conversation, and that is okay. But the collection of the, so for example, the PAN card, the Aadhaar card, the signature verification, now there is a backend API available for all these things. The agent is just taking, he's required because a human being has to have an accountability today by the, as per the regulator. I think that will also change after a while, but all the verification is being done by an algorithm at the backend. So whether this is Dheeraj, this is picture on record, picture on file, is the Aadhaar number matching or not, the verification through that API, etc., etc. Everything is done. And this whole process can take just 2 to 3 minutes. What used to be like a 48-hour exercise to get KYC done. Customer wins, business wins because they're onboarding customers faster. So yeah, there are many such examples. You could also have something which is very local on the desktop. So let's say you have a very frequent flow of checking a, let's say customer has come in, you have to check his balance in a separate application. There are these 10, 15 applications that contact center agent would have. Hopefully you have integrated them into one, but if not, then or let's say if you have legacy applications, you could actually write simple bots or macros which would, do that searching on the other application, get the data in front of the agent all in a single click, because you don't want agents to be doing a lot of decision making when he or she is on the call. So a simple button, and all this can be implemented through a desktop automation or a robotic process automation, the way people call it, kind of software, right? You could also apply intelligence on it then, but it's a very simple macro. Like if some of you have used Excel, you could do a lot of work using macros. It's a very simple thing on the desktop that you could do through automation. Hope that helps. Any other questions, Aista? Should we sign off?
Yeah, so we have got another question from Tanya. She's asking how bot to agent transfer on chat works for chat channels other than WhatsApp. Am I audible?
Yeah. There was a little bit of breakage. I'll repeat the question. What I understood was that if, let's say, a bot is talking to the customer, how would a handoff happen to an agent if it's not WhatsApp? So let's assume it's
Right.
on Facebook Messenger or a Twitter DM uh, or a Google business message or even an SMS or a website chat or an in-app chat, right, in a mobile app. So typically the architectures, the way it is done in Ameyo is you have a central bot hook. So all your channels are actually coming. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from WhatsApp or Facebook or any of the channels. The bot hook is still the same. You could be using Ameyo's bot, or you could be using Yellow Messenger's bot. We integrate with all those guys, and we have our own bots. And as soon as there is a signal from the bot, and it depends on who takes the decision. So let's say bot takes a decision that I give up, or let's say that an observer takes a decision that I give up. This so there's a customer here, the central nervous. So think of it as the central algorithm and the bot here. So this was the link that was being formed. Suddenly, you will have the link broken, and it will be passed to the agent, and the agent would have all the previous context of what was being discussed with the bot. So the agent can take it up from there and say, okay, I understand you were here for blah blah blah, and my colleague has told you blah blah blah, so we can continue the conversation. So the context is carried forward. It's not like how can I help you, right? And it should never be like that. If you have initiated a conversation and you've collected some data, the guy who's coming in next should be aware of all that, right? It's super critical. So that's how handoffs happen. And it's immaterial of the channel, people, unless you're implementing piecemeal solutions, right? Facebook chat is handled differently by different agents. In case of Ameyo, the same agent chat application could could take in chats from all mediums that you have known of, right? So WhatsApp or SMS or DM, the customer is writing on these mediums, but the agent is still on the same application. Yeah. Cool. I think we're almost out of time. So Dheeraj, let me take this opportunity to thank you, man. I think it was especially opening a little bit of your playbook. I think it's really, really valuable for the community. Uh, we'll be in touch, and hopefully on your data side there'll be some new insights in a couple of quarters. Good luck with that. Uh, and for the audience, guys, I think the pandemic has taught us a lot, and like Dheeraj mentioned, that it's not completely remote. It's not completely what it used to be. There is a new model which is better. You could look at those models which are hybrid. The pure remote has challenges around onboarding new people. There are serious challenges. So there should not be any euphoria about, yes, you could completely go remote and nothing will break. uh, so I think new hybrid models are emerging. And in the contact center specifically, the tech is all there today that if you want to run it remote, or in, let's say, remote locations and not just work from home because there are other infrastructural constraints that might come in, all that is available today, be it Ameyo or there are other vendors out there. But do have that conversation within organizations that what needs to change, because you can't be static. You can't be going back to February 2020 and saying this is how we're going to continue to run, because a lot has changed in the last 1 year. With that, thank you so much once again, Dheeraj. Take care, buddy, and good luck and health to your near ones. With everyone else also, please stay safe. Take precautions. The Prime Minister has addressed the country again today. Take precautions. Hopefully, we'll come out of it stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Dheeraj. I will be sharing the webinar recording with all the attendees. Before signing off, I would request all the attendees to please fill up a small survey that will pop up on your screen while closing the webinar window. We appreciate all you being here. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.